Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Town Board meeting of May 14th, 2024. The board has been in executive session discussing getting advice of counsel. May I have a motion to close the executive session and open the work session?
So
moved.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so tonight we're going to begin the work session with a discussion on the Upper Minkle Dam decommissioning status. And we're going to have a discussion with Tectonic Engineering.
We've got
So-
Mark Lukasik here this evening, who is our chief consultant with Tectonic, and Bob Cioli, the town engineer. In your packets is the copy of the PowerPoint presentation that Mark is going to be giving. This project has been ongoing for a number of years. It is our opportunity to take and just introduce it to some of the new board members and to let you know how the project is progressing. It is my understanding that the county's support of this project is ongoing, and they secured funds for us for the design of the project, and they will be requesting $4 million in funds to actually deconstruct the dam on our behalf. That's the real short version of it.
Okay,
Mark, can you fill us in on the rest of it?
Good night, everybody.
hello.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mark Lukasik. I'm with Tectonic Engineering, as stated. I have had the pleasure of working with the town for over 10 years on this dam, since its initial investigations through the process that we're at now. Pleasure to have the opportunity to speak briefly this evening with board members who not heard some of these similar updates in the past. Generally the town has been taking a very methodical approach toward compliance here, as many dam owners have to do. And just as an outset here, to state this dam and the water behind it is not a water supply, and it does not provide any flood control. So with that in mind, what I will start to do is I'm going to drop my camera and I'm going to share my screen, and we'll see how everything goes. So hopefully this is coming up as visible to everyone in the room.
Yes.
Yes, we can see it.
Fantastic. All right, just a quick background for orientation purposes. We are in the western corner of the town. We're just north of Route 9, just north of Austin, and we're also north of the Spring Pond condominium community, which in itself also has a pond and a dam. So the little graphic to the side shows the orientation. North is up. Lower Minkle Dam at the bottom, Upper Minkle Dam, the subject of tonight's conversation, and what kind of Newcastle has is in the upper section. Sunny Ridge Preserve kind of surrounds all of the impoundment behind Upper Minkle Dam. It's a nice 20-some-odd acre secluded piece of woods up there. A bunch of walking trails through it, so it's a nice spot up in there. Upper Minkle Dam actually has two parts to it. There's a dam, which is where the leader is pointing, and that's kind of what you would traditionally think is a dam. A lot of stone, a lot of height on the structure, holding back the water. But there's also a little leg called a dike at the south end, and those are basically there just to keep the last couple feet of water on the water body. The water body itself is about 10 feet deep. And the work of this project will focus on the removal of Upper Minkle Dam, the tall part, but it will not touch the two dikes at the south end. Once upon a time, this dam was classified as intermediate hazard. There are 3 classifications in New York: low, intermediate, high. The first engineering assessment, which is kind of a health check on the dam, that was done in 2014. It found there to be some issues with the dam. The town was given an initial set of recommendations for how to bring the dam into compliance. And as a result of both the engineering assessment at Upper Minkle Dam and the separate one done by Spring Pond at Lower Minkle Dam, both of those dams became high hazard dams. That's the highest level in New York State, predominantly because if either one were to fail, the downstream reach, leading down Sing Sing Brook and down toward the Hudson River, there could be damage to property and potential loss of life.
Mark, very quickly, I'm sorry, just for the sake of those who don't know, that does not mean it was in dire or immediate
Correct.
concern of being breached or breaking.
Correct. There was no imminent hazard to it. It was just the engineering process following the classification standards that New York State outlines. Lower Minkle Dam has since been reconstructed and is now essentially acceptable to the state. And Upper Minkle Dam is going to be decommissioned. That means we're going to remove enough of it that it can no longer impound enough water to be that downstream risk. Tectonic and the town have a lot of ongoing responsibilities out here. There's emergency action planning that has to be done. As long as this dam is a high hazard dam, everybody needs to be aware of its existence and what to do in the event of emergency. There's also an enhanced monitoring program, which is a joint inspection protocol that is executed both by the town of Newcastle and by Tectonic. We then submit quarterly to New York State and keep them up to date with any observations or findings or changes in condition. Similarly, both Tectonic and the town communicate with DEC on a routine basis just to give them status updates and let them know where this project stands. The engineering assessment we indicated is complete. As part of the enhanced monitoring program, there's also a siphon out there which can essentially manually lower the water if it need be. The enhanced maintenance plan, inspection plan we mentioned. There was an alternatives analysis done looking at do we repair it all the way, do we decommission it? That was back in 2017. That was also funded by a grant by New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. And right about the pandemic, right in the thick of it, 2020, the town came to the conclusion, after reviewing all the options, to pursue decommissioning. As I believe Jill mentioned before, the county came into play with their stormwater grant program, which provided a real shot in the arm in terms of funding, since these projects tend to be rather expensive. And the decommissioning design went through a procurement process and is now ongoing. Those surveys, the investigations, the schematic design were all the first steps of the design process, and all of that is complete. Last year, we completed a pre-application meeting with DEC. That was a good idea in our mind, and it turned out to be a good idea in DEC's as well. Since DEC has been getting more and more applications for decommissioning, and they've been getting more and more particular about what they want to see. So one thing that came out of that was a request to do some additional sediment sampling. That was done late in 2023. The county, not only are they participating in the funding side of things, they're also providing mitigation design with the help of their planning department. So a lot of the planting and restoration that is going to be completed out here is designed by Westchester County themselves. The last assessment, if you noted before, the 10-year engineering assessments, the first one was done in 2014. That means 2024, this year, another one would have been due. It would have been a real shame to have to complete that, given that we know the answer and nobody intends to keep this dam. So we requested that the DEC waive that requirement, and they agreed. So what are we doing out here? On screen, you'll see, depending on how close you are to the screen, a couple colors, green, dark blue, and light blue. So the current water surface is what is occupied by all three colors. And that's about 3 acres of land area if it were land. What will happen under this project is we will remove a section of the existing dam, and we'll remove a lot of the tall remaining stones that comprise the dam. And in that process, the water levels will no longer reach that green extent. In large storms, they will stretch across both blues. On a bright sunny day like we had today, you'll see the light blue small pools interconnected by essentially small streams. That ultimately is what the decommissioned Upper Minkle Dam impoundment will look like at a macro level. As I mentioned before, the dikes, which back up to 2 residential properties, they are at the far left of this drawing and they will be untouched. The stone that is comprising the current dam now can be reused for a lot of stabilization needs, which is a bonus in that we have material on hand that we don't have to truck in. And separately, it's material that we have on hand that we don't have to truck out. So that reduces a lot of the impact of the local roadways and the cost of the project, removing those hard materials. There are quite a bit of sediments within the water body itself. The proposal, and as a result of all the testing of the sediments, is to basically break them into 2 groups. One of the sediments will be stockpiled at the left side of your screen, what would be the south end of what would have been the water body, and the balance will be scattered in the 2 edges on the east of the former impoundment.
So
With
I
the county's planning
have a
plans.
question.
Go ahead.
Just, I don't know if I should wait till the end, but I'm just curious, when you remove the stone wall that comprises the dam, do you do that gradually? I mean, what's the practical effect of it? Where does the water go? And is that something, how do you manage that?
Sure. So the first step, day one of a construction contract out here, the contractor will assemble a siphon, which essentially will use gravity to draw the water out of the impoundment, out of the body of water behind Upper Minkle Dam, and discharge it into Purdy Pond below. So the contractor is going to drain the pond over about a week and a half, and expose the bottom. So once that water is out, a lot of the risk to removing any of the structure has been alleviated. All that pressure is gone. However, what we don't really want to do is we don't want to remove the dam first. What we want to do is build everything that we need behind, manage all our sediments, control everything in essentially the basin. Until everything is the way we want it, and stabilize it, then we will take the dam apart. So taking the stones down is going to be, the second half of the job.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So where does the water go when they siphon it out?
In the spring
In the
of the
pond.
reconstruction process and the best planting seasons available to us, that's when the county's planting plans will be implemented. And the project will receive a wide variety of woodland and wetland vegetation across it. And there'll be a whole establishment program during construction to ensure the survivability of those materials. At the very bottom of the screen is a quick accounting, just for awareness. The footprint of the project is almost 3.5 acres. So that doesn't change from beginning to end. But you will see that we start out with about 3 acres of water. We end up with 0.3 acres of water. And we go from 0.4 acres of wetlands to 0.5 acres of wetlands. And we generate quite a bit of upland as a result, almost 2.5 acres.
Mark, before you go to the next slide, could you just explain where the water that's siphoned, where does it go?
It goes into Purdy Pond, which is in the upper left corner. I can get it back. It will discharge into Purdy Pond, which is behind the Lower Minkle Dam.
And the additional water doesn't adversely affect the lower body, water body?
No, their spillway has been redesigned and is able to handle a very substantial storm, basically half of a hurricane. And the discharge over about 7 to 10 days is very insignificant during the construction process.
Okay, Jen.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This view on screen now is just a profile slicing through the project. What you really see here is the level line in the middle of the page is where the water level is today. And when this project is complete, you'll have the cascading through the pools from the upstream end on the right to Purdy Pond, the downstream end on the left. A lot of the shading at the bottom is just representing all the sedimentation that is scooped out and relocated. And I just wanted to note, because I didn't say this before, all the sediments that we are removing from where the water will be flowing, from pond to pond and through the streams, it'll all be relocated to a place that is outside of any future erosive flows, any high velocity flows, any flooding. So once we move the sediments away, they're not going to be resuspended and sent downstream into Purdy Pond. Right now, we've mentioned the county mitigation design that they have contributed to this project. We were also in the seeker process. That was begun, I believe, I'm not just speaking under the prior town board. Either way, there will be additional seeker review to be completed by the town board and process under coordination with our office and town engineer and town planner. The detailed design has been completed. We are approaching the ERB next week with the town. That will also be an opportunity for the public to view, comment on the project. And finally, we have access that is being negotiated with 2 private property owners. The project, Upper Minkle Dam, the water body, is practically landlocked. There's no road that leads right up to the water body that we can use for construction equipment. So after going through a number of options, we landed on the approach that's currently in the process of being coordinated with the 2 property owners. Just to put a picture with that, the yellow dots are the route that we wish to take. There are 2 properties involved, one in Newcastle, one in Ossining. Newcastle is red, the larger property on the top, blue, Ossining on the bottom. The essential approach is to utilize an existing driveway and then to lay construction matting across the balance of the property to reach into a stretch of Upper Minkle Dam's water body. The water, as I mentioned before, will be drained, so then the vehicles can continue in there en masse.
Did you say how long? Did you say how long this particular process would take?
The entire project is going to take approximately 9 months from when we start until the plants are sufficiently established that we can release the contractor from any immediate guarantees and just put them on maintenance guarantees.
Okay, so you'll be going through this access point during all that time, right?
9 months.
Correct.
Okay.
And the general premise of the project is tried to be cognizant of that. We want to limit the amount of materials that we haul in and out, so we want to keep things on site as much as possible. The major deliveries are essentially, the matting and whatnot for access, and then a lot of the plant materials. Those are the 2 big ticket items. There will be some importing of some materials, some essentially clean fill and some topsoil. But otherwise, the majority of the traffic is gonna be contractor pickups, going in the morning, and out at night.
Okay, well, I'm sure the property owners are happy that their properties won't be at risk anymore, so I'm glad they're giving you access.
Just to clarify, the blue property, the property in Ossining, it's a small corner of the red property's driveway trickles across the corner of their property as it is today. So it's just a matter of doing the right thing and asking for the right permissions from that property owner. The impact is, well, practically negligible to the Ossining landowner.
I'm sure he won't see it that way.
Yes, okay.
Can I ask an aesthetics question? Because
Sure.
it looks, and excuse me if this is, if I'm asking silly questions, I don't know anything, this is my first exposure to it. But if with the water level going down that far, I drive every day on the Sprain, and there's a water body along the Sprain near the Tuckahoe Road exit, and the water level, maybe they've worked on something similar, I don't know, but the water level went down so significantly, so much plant life was shown that didn't look very appealing. Like the water body just looks so different. And I wonder, is there going to be an aesthetic difference with the water level going down that low?
I believe the project you're referring to is actually a project that was also funded by the same Westchester County program that this project will be funded with. They're in the process of rehabilitating that dam, and they're modifying some of their valves and controls for that dam. So I believe what you're seeing is temporary lowering. It's a fairly involved project, takes a couple of months for it to go. So if you do it at the right time of year, Mother Nature will take over and things will grow. What we are doing here is not allowing or not relying on Mother Nature to revegetate the interior. The county has come up with a design to select the species that we are going to plant and then promote, and those should win out over weeds, for example.
Okay.
So as a result, you're going to have quite a bit of trees. You're going to have a lot of selected plant material in here. It should develop over about a 5-year plan of establishment and monitoring. It should develop a woodland with emergent wetlands surrounding a few vernal pools within it. It should look quite pleasant when it's complete. And it should ultimately, 5 years from now, it will not look manufactured, it will look natural.
Great, thank you so much.
And as the plant geek, so this is probably a good
Do you
time
want to come to the table,
interject.
Dennis?
Come sit.
Oh, I'm sorry. So, the history of this, obviously, you build a dam because, there's a flowing body of water that you want to create a different aesthetic. This wasn't done for ecological reasons 100 years ago, for sure. So when you go through Sunny Ridge, this area is fed by multiple water courses, and they flow through a number of like these palustrine emergent forested systems, and the understory of that is predominantly like skunk cabbage, tussock sedge, and sensitive ferns. So regardless of what we plant here, I'm convinced, especially when it comes to herbs, just not the woody stuff, that you're going to get a fair amount of natural recruitment from all of that, because the flows are going to continue, the seed base is there. So if your aesthetic is preferred, a 10-foot open water body, then yes, you visually, there's ecological function and value were the two categories. Function is what does nature do regardless of what we think of it, and then the value is, what are the humans? Can I fish in it? Can I boat in it? Can I swim in it? Is it so? I think that's going to be the biggest change is the aesthetic, that people that are used to seeing a body of water that's, as Mark said, of size, it's now going to be more like this riparian corridor with some open water pockets and maybe some micro depressions, because you never exactly grade perfectly, and that's fine. They kind of form naturally, and these are all good, good things for ecology and habitat. So we're gonna, in the county, myself and Suzette walked the area and we, in coming up with the plantings, she had, some ideas and she knows a lot, so it was great to, walk and talk with her. But part of the reason was to walk and see what already does exist, because you wanna complement it, and at the end of the day, I'm not an artist, I don't put my signature on this, and I don't wanna know that I was there. And that's kinda how you wanna be at the end of the day if your restoration truly works, so that's how you kinda try to, bring it all together.
And is it going to please the residents who have a view of it, or is it going to be jarring for them?
Well, it's funny, I think there was one woman I remembered in 2020 when this was being presented who had a long-standing history and was used to looking at a pond.
Right,
And now they're not gonna be looking at that anymore.
okay.
However, some of those residents may now not be subject to chapter 137 or chapter 64, because since you're reducing the amount of wetland, their properties may not be technically out of a buffer and may actually have more opportunity to do projects that they couldn't do before,
okay.
or since wetlands is the four-letter word in real estate, may even increase in value.
Right,
And I'm just
okay.
coming off the cuff with that, I have no data to support that.
That's good news.
And who doesn't want more skunk cabbage, right?
Looks good to me, that's
And I
just
guess
me.
aesthetics is in the eye of the beholder,
This is
right?
true.
Someone might like something that looks a little bit manicured, whereas someone else might want exactly what you said,
Natural.
Dennis, that we don't wanna know that anyone was there. We just wanna see what nature provides and, with the addition of trees.
Yeah, you
So
need, you need to
it's
kickstart
hard
it for sure,
hard to
yeah.
know what people will like, but
Mhm.
I'm glad to know that it's not going to be left sort of by chance
Right,
to look kind of disastrous for years to come. So I'm
Yeah.
glad you're going to give it a head start.
understood,
Yeah, thank you for that.
Thank you.
sure.
I hope
Sorry.
we'll have like a photographic story of the process of this going on.
Well, that would actually be part, the requirements of the monitoring, annually, so you do photo document, there's like quantitative elements to actually doing, whether you're, assessing the woody stuff or you're actually doing coverage of the herbaceous cover, how it's spreading. But other than just taking pictures of your individual sample points, it's a good idea to grab panoramics like year to year
Yeah.
to see, how that's progressing, so that will definitely be done, yes.
Okay.
Okay, so we're gonna move along because it's 7:00 and we're gonna have people waiting
you.
pretty
Thank you.
soon. Thank you, Dennis, that was
Dennis.
really,
You're very
really
welcome.
helpful.
Mark?
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah,
Thank you
Mark,
so much.
Mark, were you finished with your presentation? Because we had questions in the middle of it, so just wanna make sure that you
I'll
finished.
leave you with the screen that's up now, just your schedule. Next step is the environmental review board. We'll complete our permitting second half of this year into 2025 with the state and the feds. The county funding, already discussed earlier at the beginning of the meeting. Puts our public bid date 2025, construction winter to spring. Roughly by July 4th, the project is anticipated to be complete 2026. And as Dennis just alluded to, the mitigation monitoring will stretch for about 5 years afterward, just to make sure we get to the establishment that we're looking for. And I skipped right over, but the good one for the town, to save a bunch of money, is the enhanced monitoring ends with the commencement of construction and the draining of the water. With that, I thank you all.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Bob.
Okay,
Speaking of
Okay,
money,
bye-bye. Good night, guys.
bye-bye, good night.
Speaking of money.
speaking of money, Rob.
Good night.
So we had discussed, Rob, possibly doing your presentation during the town board.
Okay.
Or after
That's
Jill, we had
That's fine.
discussed that briefly, but seeing that it's
It doesn't,
7 o'clock.
whatever we have time for, I mean, it's fine either way,
and
staying for the meeting.
we have Chris coming on.
Right,
and
so do
waiting,
you
so I
want,
don't wanna keep
maybe we
them
could just
waiting.
go through the administrative items on the work session, I'm gonna ask.
Okay, Rob,
Rob,
would
if he-
that work out
That's fine.
with your presentation?
I'm here, I'm not going anywhere.
Okay,
Yeah, Rob's gonna take the administrative items, I'm gonna give the books a rest.
I don't know if I can get through it too.
Okay,
We're
go
both
ahead.
coughing. Just to go through the administrative items, we have two payments of claims, retroactive from the prior week and one being issued this week. We have the authorization to accept our annual allocation of CHIPS, Pave New York, Extreme Winter Recovery, and Pave Our Potholes funds for fiscal year. Those four combined to total $586,000, which is a good number. It goes up a little bit every year. We have an authorization to approve additional construction observation services with H2M Architects. That's what we talked about a little bit in executive session, where we're going to have H2M monitor the project on a full-time basis as opposed to part-time, and that's what the change order is. We have an authorization to accept the ozone upgrade for the primary disinfectant system at the Millwood Water Treatment Plant. Over the last year or two, we have been upgrading our ozone generators. I think we have 3 of them at the Millwood Water Treatment Plant. So the cost on this renovation is $60,148. That was anticipated in the budget. We have an authorization to purchase a Zoots replacement engine for our reed screener down at DPW. That machine was from 1990?
Yep.
It's about 34 years old, so I guess it's about time for the engine to be replaced on
What's a
that.
reed screener?
Thank you.
It's part of the process, from what I understand, down at the recycling center when we bring in yard waste and we turn it into compost and mulch. We just purchased the horizontal grinder, which is part of it, and then the screener is another part of the operation. I don't know which comes first, the screener or the grinder.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Grinder
Either way,
first,
it's a necessary
screening
piece.
second.
Yeah.
Got it.
We had a street opening bond permit release. The authorization to waive the field rental fee for the JCCA Wiffle Ball fundraiser. And authorization to use town property for the American Red Cross blood drive.
Okay, thank you, Rob. So we will have your quarterly financial update at the town board meeting after the call to order, right before public comment.
Sure.
Okay. All right, so now we will move to the table and we'll take care of business with opening up the town board meeting.
I do see
When
that
we move.
Assemblyman Burdick has signed in, so
Here, we need this table moved. Okay, good evening again, everyone. We've just had our work session and I'd like a motion to close the work session of May 14th, 2024 of the Newcastle Town Board. And a motion to open the town board meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, so today we have the great honor of having our Assemblyman Chris Burdick with us. Welcome, Chris.
Well, thank you. It's very good to be here. And actually, I think it's been a while since I've made any kind of report to you folks, so glad that I have this opportunity.
Yes,
And-
welcome, Chris. And I just want to say that it's not been a while since you've been in our town. You come here so often for so many of our events. And so we're really happy to have you here again, but I want everyone to know that you're actually here quite often. So you just haven't
Well,
been
I try to be.
Yes.
A lot going on in Newcastle, and I don't want to miss it, and I want to provide my support as much as I can. So it's been a busy year in Albany, and what started out with a budget that looked as though we were going to have quite a contentious negotiation with the governor, but I think that there was certainly negotiation, but it wasn't as contentious as it was last year. I think folks will remember that it was very contentious, particularly for us in Westchester County, very concerned about the housing compact. There also was a good deal of contention over bail reform. And while there were certainly very strong differences with the governor, I think the tone was much different than it was last year. And I think that as a result, it enabled us to be in a better place and be able to conclude the budget, even though we were late, I think in good order, and a budget that I think is good for the people of the state and the people of the 93rd Assembly District. It started out though, and you almost have to go back to the fall because that's when you may recall that some economists are still talking about the possibility of a recession. It was also looking as though we were going to have a significant budget gap. You know, there were projections of a $9 billion budget gap. And that kind of framed the whole executive budget that the legislature had received in the middle of January. But actually, by the time we received it, the financial picture for the state had markedly improved. So that instead of actually looking at a big budget deficit, we were actually looking at that point, flat, and which was terrific, a wonderful improvement. And by the time that we actually agreed with the executive on revenue, that was bumped up a little bit more. And so that certainly put everyone in a better position. On the other hand, let's not forget that the huge amount of pandemic relief was gone. And so the state needed to adjust for that, and this budget reflects a good deal of that. Unfortunately, it started out where I think the governor, I think we're to be very candid, was poorly advised in suggesting that there be significant cuts in education. And that was the area where the legislature pushed back the hardest, and in particular, in the 93rd Assembly District, all of my school districts except one would have sustained cuts. Now that was a big shock to the school community because for years they had relied upon aid from the state as being no worse than the previous year under a provision called hold harmless. A complicated formula for how state aid to public schools is allocated. But that formula, for many years, was modified by something called hold harmless, which means that whatever that formula came up with, that school district would get no less than the previous year. Well, the governor's proposal was to eliminate the hold harmless provision and also to reduce the inflation factor. And so that resulted in school districts, nearly half the school districts in the state, would have had cuts in their allocation of aid from the state. Even Mount Vernon had a reduction, would have sustained a reduction. And you couldn't find in Westchester County a more needy school district than Mount Vernon. But Chappaqua was hit, Valhalla was hit, Ossining was hit. All of those school districts were hit. And so we successfully pushed back against that. The hold harmless provision was kept in place, and it provides for a 2.8% inflation factor. And so Chappaqua, the result there is foundation aid, which is the principal source of state aid to public schools, was flat rather than negative. Ossining, an increase of 3.36%. Valhalla, an increase of 4.99%. And so it was a significant turnaround on that. Another area where we had differences with the governor was in funding for environmental programs. It would have cut in half the amount that we have for water quality improvement programs, and we restored that. And so there's $500 million in the budget for clean water projects, and funding for the Environmental Protection Fund is at $400 million. In the area of infrastructure, it does provide for significant funding and much needed funding for infrastructure. It includes an increase in what's called Consolidated Local Street and Highway Improvement, or CHIPS. I think you folks are all familiar with that. And so we were pleased to see that. Is it enough? No. And particularly with Region 8, of which we were a part, we legislators in Westchester County and in Hudson Valley generally feel that we're getting shortchanged on that. We have the highest number of lane miles in the state of any region, and the highest number of bridges, and the allocations don't reflect that. So we are working to see what we can do about changing that situation. Nonetheless, that's what we have now, and we're going to make the best of it, and you can be sure that I will continue to pound on the table to get state roads in Newcastle attended to as they should be. Interesting, other areas is that interestingly, for the first time, we came up with housing policy, and maybe you didn't hear that much about it, and the reason why is because for outside of New York City, there is no requirement for any kind of rent control, such as good cause eviction, which is something that's in the city. And what that is that would provide for a cap on rents in the city. What that is it would be the lower of 10% or inflation plus 5%, CPI plus 5%. Now, what it means for outside the city is that there's considerable flexibility if, on an opt-in basis, a municipality wants to opt into it. It also includes flexibility to a municipality to have a higher number of units that would be exempted. So 10 units or fewer is the default setting, but a municipality outside of New York City could increase that. Another thing that for outside the city for the first time, this is something that I campaigned for in negotiations on the budget, and that is to provide some incentive for affordable housing developers. There too, this would be on an opt-in basis in which a municipality could provide a tax abatement program for an affordable housing developer. And basically the way it works is in the first couple of years, they would pay very little in the way of taxes, but that would gradually phase out over a 25-year period of time. Now, I've heard some people say, well, you're taking away from tax revenue. Well, you don't have tax revenue if you have a new project that hasn't been built yet. And so you'll be reducing in the early years tax revenue, but you'll be incentivizing affordable housing. And so that's my sales pitch for people to consider it anyway. We also have recognized in the budget, which, as I've indicated, includes legislation that with retail theft on the rise, we create new crimes of assault on a retail worker and fostering the sale of stolen goods. And it amends the larceny statute to allow for the aggregation of the value of retail property to be considered as part of the common scheme or plan. And so we are hoping that this, together with additional funding for law enforcement, that may deter retail theft. In addition to help combat hate crimes, there's additional funding for the safety of organizations at risk of hate crimes. And also, it includes $30 million for organizations that benefit the Asian American and Pacific Islander community. There also are provisions that actually I am concerned about how long-term managed care is being handled and that's a Medicaid program called the Consumer Directed Personal Assistance Program, which provides support to those with disabilities and chronic illnesses, such as the disability community and the elderly. And it changes the whole structure of that. It had been carried out in large measure by fiscal responsibility by over 600 fiscal intermediaries. And in what is billed as a cost-saving measure aimed at achieving $200 million a year in reduced costs, it consolidates the number of fiscal intermediaries from 600 some odd to a single statewide fiscal intermediary, which would receive, instead of the 15% fee, they would receive 5%. My concern and the concern for disability advocates and those who provide services to them is that it could result in a lapse of coverage or a reduction in coverage. And we in the legislature are going to need to be vigilant to ensure that that does not occur. Part of our oversight responsibility. I have a significant legislative agenda of my own that I'm trying to get bills across the finish line, ranging in environmental protection with, once again, trying to get a bill across the finish line that would give local governments that have local freshwater wetlands law the ability to prohibit the application of pesticides in certain wetlands, those that are hydrologically connected to public water supplies. Also, one that may be of interest is one that may actually go the distance, and that is to require all municipalities to update applicable forms and data systems to include a gender X option. And that also, having heard concerns about who's going to pay for this, why is it something that is mandated instead, what it's going to provide for is it only would go into effect in the regular course of business when a municipality reorders forms or updates its data systems. So coming out of local government, I'm very sensitive to unfunded mandates. Also, a number of disability bills. One we call the Traveling with Dignity Act, and that I'm working on. Pete Harkman is carrying it in the Senate, I'm carrying it in the Assembly. And that's to provide adult changing tables to be placed within an enclosed restroom facility. And that would be for new facility. It would not require retrofits. Also, just reported out of the Health Committee, is it would require healthcare professionals to ask patients if they have a disability that requires accommodation under the Americans with Disabilities Act. A number of other bills that I have, one that's local is one for the benefit of the Millwood Fire District. It's Benevolent Association, and that does look as though that's going to go across the finish line. I know that the supervisor is going to talk about funding that I'm securing for Newcastle, and so I'm not going to steal her thunder and instead allow her to get to that in due course. But I certainly want to offer the opportunity for any questions or comments that you might have on what I've presented thus far.
Any questions for Assemblyman Burdick from anyone?
Chris, when you say you're looking at further protections for organizations subjected to hate crimes, what kinds of organizations are you thinking of or alluding to?
So that's a great question. I know that previously, with the provision in last year's budget, that would be available for, as an example, synagogues that might have events that require security to be present because of concern about disturbances. I have not seen whether that's gonna follow yet. I haven't seen whether it's gonna follow that same course, whether it'll be done through grant funding. But I would anticipate that that's how it would be carried out.
Chris, I have a general question for you about housing. I know that the governor did something very different this year than she did, and a couple of years ago, there was a pretty heavy-handed top-down mandate regarding TOD and ADU legislation. And I'm wondering if you're seeing anything like that again on the horizon. I know we've just come off of a budget season and everyone's probably taking a break from all of this, but I'm just curious because we have a development coming online in our town on our North Greeley Avenue. We have a project that's we're going to receive an application on, and I guess the point I'm getting at is that municipalities such as ours have very limited infrastructure, and if we do build new housing, I hope that there's a baseline here and that we can be given credit prior to any kind of new initiative or legislation coming online in the future, so that we're not faced with unreasonable mandates again. I know that the previous TOD ADU legislation, for instance, in Mount Vernon, would have been impossible to comply with because they're completely built up. So I'm just sort of looking way into the future a little bit. And I guess my ask is that if anything like that comes on the table again, that those of us with kind of limited infrastructure be given some kind of credit for what's been done in the recent past.
So I remember well, I think I called in from the road to a work session about a year ago, as I recall, maybe no more than that, I think, because it was during the budget negotiations. And at that point, we were fighting against the so-called housing compact, which contained exactly the elements that we didn't want to see. We didn't want to see the construction mandates. We didn't want to see a requirement that municipalities adopt a transit-oriented district that, as a right, would give developers the opportunity to significantly increase density around railroad stations and so forth. And I just don't see that coming down the pike. I think that the governor, I think, saw that there was such fierce opposition to anything of that nature that she was going to encounter that again if she were to propose it. So we saw none of that. And you see much more that's incentive based. And that's, in fact, in the city, as an example, they redid their 421A program to provide benefits to developers. They restructured that. They made it easier for small landlords to recapture the cost of improvements when tenants leave and they're going to renovate the apartment. So the whole thrust of it was much more incentive based. And I've also noticed one of the municipalities, and I've seen this at play with one of the municipalities that I represent up the line, Lewisboro, that is very interested in transit-oriented development for one of its, for its railroad station at Goldman's Bridge. And the positive thing that has come out of that is that state agencies will not only answer the phone now, not only will they come to meetings, but the MTA in that case, at its cost, is going to develop a feasibility plan. So the whole mindset of state agencies is to work with municipalities, and I can tell you it is very welcome to see this coming down the pipe. rather than, as you very rightly call it, a top-down approach to trying to develop housing. So, no, I don't see anything along those lines coming along, and if it should, I'll be among those that are going to take up pitchforks to fight against it. So.
All right, any other questions for the Assemblyman before I just wanna talk about the grants that we've been very lucky to get and will be getting.
If you humor me for 1 minute, Assemblyman Burdick, but I think maybe more offline. You mentioned the new penal law statutes for shoplifting and assault on a retail worker. I just quickly try to Google them and find them. I will just tell you from a practical standpoint, I probably, as a criminal defense attorney, represented a solid 100 people a year for shoplifting, misdemeanor possession like heroin or cocaine or crack, graffiti. I think I can count on one hand how many people I defend now because they just don't get prosecuted anymore in the city. And the reason being is not because of the law, like the penal law that you guys are changing, which will have some impact, and this is just from a practical standpoint, but the problem that bail reform has caused is that prosecutors, and I see it myself, can't spend the time and energy to gather all that paperwork on these lower level crimes that are just gonna get like slapped on the wrist and go, not ultimately be held accountable in terms of a top charge. So as a result, what they do is they just don't prosecute them. So I would just tell you, and I'm happy again to discuss more offline, while these new laws may be helpful, they're not really capturing the major issue. The reason why these crimes aren't being prosecuted anymore, and why when you go into a CVS, more so in the city, not less so up here, everything is locked up. Everything is locked up. But I think that needs really to be looked at, and I appreciate all you do, and I know that you certainly care, and anyone who's listening should know that you are one of the hardest working people that I ever met. And we're incredibly grateful, but I think this may be more of a Band-Aid than dealing with the issue on a greater scale, which will impact Westchester, which will impact Onondaga County, which will impact, Brooklyn, Manhattan, and Queens as well. So I just share that with you. Thank you.
Well, thank you, I appreciate that, and I would be delighted to chat with you offline about it and get your thoughts.
Okay.
Before we move into more practical matters, Chris, I just want to thank you so much for all the work that you do, especially on behalf of people with disabilities and mental health issues. I don't think you even mentioned what you do on behalf of mental health care, and I know you do a lot. So thank you so much for that. And I think the Gender X option that you're supporting is very important for our queer community. So again, thank you for everything that you're sponsoring and trying to get across the finish line.
Well, you're very welcome. It's truly my honor.
Yeah, and I'd like to end by also thanking you on the practical side of things. I just wanna go over a little bit of history really quickly and just remind everyone of the work you did for us in obtaining grants back in 2021. You obtained a $125,000 SAM grant that we used for our Millwood playground and tennis courts and security system and our train station. And in 2022, you got us a $125,000 SAM grant that we used for the Chapac roof replacement. And in 2023, a $125,000 CREST grant that we used for, no, okay.
That's what this is.
That's what, well, we're getting 2023 and 2024 mixed up. So we are on the verge of getting, and we just have to submit an application now, and correct me if I'm wrong on the numbers, but it's a $250,000 CREST grant application. And Chris, if you wanna tell us a little bit more about that, but we are really looking forward to what we can do to improve accessibility to our camps by expanding our facilities, our indoor facilities at Amsterdam Camp, getting our septic fields built and expanding what we have there for our garden club and for our summer camp. And it's a very substantial number for us. $250,000 is much higher than what we usually get. So we're really, really grateful to you and the work you've done to advocate for us. And it's a substantial number that we will put to very good use.
So just to explain a little bit about the funding cycle, which can be a little confusing, is the money that the grant of the 250,000, and that is the right number, is actually 2023 funds that I have, an allocation to members for that. As long as the entity is eligible and the project is eligible, then it's about as certain as you can get it with the state that those funds will flow, all on a reimbursement basis. And this work was, again, for one of the parts, and I was trying to pull that up, and actually, that application has been submitted, and the paperwork back from the Speaker's office came through, and you folks turned that around lickety-split. And so that's on its way. One thing I should mention is that, as you may know, it's on a reimbursement basis. The project must be completed. And so to the extent that the 250,000 does not cover the full project cost, then the town would need to find other sources of funding for completion of the project. And I'll be honest with you that right now, I'm looking for my Excel spreadsheet that has the description, but I think I can find it. And so just give me a second. And I think that's for Amsterdam Gedney, I think it's Gedney Park, is it? That we have that for? Let me just see.
I think it's Amsterdam.
It is Amsterdam.
It is,
Okay.
yes.
And, just so you know, that my approach on all of this has been to go to the town and ask them, what capital needs do they have? And how can I help to get you to the completion of that project? Very frequently, the funds that I get cover a big chunk of the project costs. And there may be instances, in fact, where it covers the entire project cost. But this is for improvements to Amsterdam, and I think that we have received, in fact, the full description of it when you copied me and my staff on submission of the paperwork to the Ways and Means Committee of the Assembly. And I think that Jill may have sent that. So if you'll give me a second, I will find that.
Yes, she did. It's okay if you can't find it exactly.
Here we are.
She did.
Newcastle Grant sent, I think this is it right here. And so for the purpose, let's just see if I have it. So Newcastle Crest Grant. And it looks to me as though it's, okay, here's the purpose. It's the installation of septic field and restoration of playing field, installation of ADA compliant bathrooms at Amsterdam Park, which is the site of the summer camp for 160. And the cost of that project is $250,000. So that's the brief description of the project, and really delighted that I can be in a position to provide for that. And I wanted to make up for not having provided $125,000 in 2023, so that it's $250,000 this year.
we really appreciate it, Chris, and just thank you so much for your continued support and your advocacy and being so accessible. You know, whenever I need an answer to a question and I call, you are most of the time right there, and if you're not, you call me right back. So I appreciate your accessibility and your tremendous support. We're lucky to have you.
Well, I appreciate those kind words, and I say this, and I have to tell you that I mean every word of it, and that is that together, you know, when I work with my local partners, whether it's at the town level or the county level, and we're collaborating, and I say that this is, by the way, regardless of the political party of who's in charge of the town government, you know, that we then are doing what government is supposed to be doing, which is to work together in the interest of the entire community. And I have two other communities, each Republican supervisors, and you know, we do the same thing. We work together very collaboratively, and as a result, you know, we're able to benefit best the communities that we serve. So you folks in Newcastle are certainly a shining example of collaborating and working as best you can with all of your partners in government. So it's really my pleasure to be working with you all.
Okay, thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
And we really appreciate the time you've taken to be with us. I know you're busy hopping into your different constituencies and to Albany, and you're a busy person, so we really appreciate the time today. If you wanna stick around, you can, but I know you've got things to do, so
Well, I appreciate that offer, but unfortunately, I have another engagement that I have to get to. But I very much appreciate that, and thank you for the good work that all of you folks do.
okay, thank you,
Thank
Chris.
you, Chris.
Good night.
Good night, take care, bye-bye.
Okay. That was great, and now we have some really exciting things to announce. First, I'd like to take the time to recognize that this is National Police Week recognition from May 12th through May 18th of this week. National Police Week is recognized to recognize officers who have lost their lives in the line of duty. We are very fortunate to have some wonderful police officers here together with our police chief, Jim Carroll, and we so much appreciate their service. And in fact, we've had a lot of new officers, young new officers who've come to our town, and both new and senior ones are so community minded and really care about our residents. So I would just like to read this proclamation, which I will present to them tomorrow for an annual recognition barbecue. So I will read this, the National Police Week proclamation from the town of Newcastle. Whereas in 1962, President Kennedy proclaimed May 15th as National Police Officers Memorial Day, and the calendar week in which May 15th falls as National Police Week. Whereas National Police Week was established by a joint resolution of Congress in 1962, whereas National Police Week pays special recognition to law enforcement officers who have lost their lives in the line of duty for the safety and protection of others, and whereas the town board of the town of Newcastle wishes to honor the service of our dedicated law enforcement officers around the nation and in the town of Newcastle, and wish to show our deep appreciation to them for keeping our community safe. Now therefore be it resolved that the town board of the town of Newcastle hereby declares and proclaims May 12th through 18th, 2024 as National Police Week for the town of Newcastle in the state of New York. Okay. And next on our agenda is a very special recognition for a new Eagle Scout, Dylan Peter Hoey, who is here in the audience with his very proud parents. Dylan, I would like to say a little something about you and present you with a proclamation, and let me find it. Here it is. So Dylan, if you want to come up to the microphone with me And I'll say a little something and read your proclamation, and we'll get your picture taken. Jill, is there someone who can take a picture? You can use my
Do my best.
camera, do your best, okay. All right, well, come on up, Dylan. If the proud parents want to come up and stand up here too, you are more than welcome. Let me get to the microphone. This one. So we have Dylan Peter Hoey here and his proud parents, Terrence and Susanna Hoey. Good to see you. I want to say a few words about Peter first. Dylan Dylan Peter Hoey has been a scout with Troop 1 of Katona since 2017. He advanced in his troop to senior patrol leader, taking on challenging duties and responsibilities and completing all requirements for Eagle Scout. And this year, on March 2024, an Eagle Scout Board of Review was convened by the Greater Hudson Valley Council, and they confirmed and registered Eagle Scout Dylan Peter Hoey and his Board of Review an Eagle Scout date of March 20th, 2024. And Dylan's Eagle Scout service project was a very challenging one. It entailed an entire year of research, surveys, design, permitting, and construction. He worked with a team of consultants, contractors, and suppliers and Troop 1 Katona Scouts to build 2 large field stone masonry abutments and a 4-foot by 18-foot bridge above a stream and wetland area at Stepping Stones in Katona, New York. The Stepping Stones Foundation mission is to foster public understanding of alcoholism and inspire recovery by preserving and sharing the historic home, archives, and legacy of Bill and Lois Wilson, the co-founders of Alcoholics Anonymous and Al-Anon family groups. In addition, Dylan's fundraising efforts raised $7,500 for the service project, and in excess of $2,400 will be presented to the Stepping Stones Foundation for use in future projects. So Dylan's Eagle Scout Court of Honor will be held on May 16th, 2024 at the Katona Presbyterian Church. So Dylan, now I'd like to present you with a proclamation from the town of Newcastle. This is a certificate of recognition presented to Dylan Peter Hoey in recognition of your extraordinary achievement in earning the rank of Eagle Scout by achieving outstanding fundraising efforts to build 2 large fieldstone masonry abutments and footbridge above a stream and wetland area at Stepping Stones in Katona, as well as donating to the Stepping Stones Foundation, whose mission is to foster public understanding of alcoholism and inspire recovery by preserving and sharing the historic home, archives, and legacy of Bill and Lois Wilson. And furthermore, recognizing your overall exemplary service to the Scouts of America, Troop 1 Katona. So congratulations, Peter. We are very proud of you to have young men like you in the town of Newcastle. And I'm sure your parents are very proud as well. And we're glad that you could be with us to accept this recognition from the town.
Thank you very much.
Here you go. Would you like to take a picture? And you can invite the whole town board to take a picture too.
Sure.
Okay, come on in.
It's all Dylan.
All Dylan, no
It's all
parents?
Dylan.
Okay.
very much.
Congratulations, Dylan.
Congratulations.
Sounds really
Congratulations,
complicated.
good for you.
All right.
Of
we
course,
go.
come on.
Come on.
You had something to do with it.
Congratulations, that's
Yeah.
amazing.
Thank you.
What an accomplishment.
Okay.
Oh, here, I'll swing in then.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Here we go.
Yeah. Looks good. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. Great job, Dylan.
Good to see you.
Very nice to see you.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Okay. And next, we have another recognition. We have a food allergy proclamation. And for this proclamation and a lot of the work that went behind it, I want to recognize and thank one of our young residents. I'm not sure if he's a sophomore at Horace Greeley High School, Jared Seance, who has been working very hard on allergy awareness ever since he was in elementary school. And I remember Jared very well. Was it in the second grade, Stacy? Fourth grade, okay, yeah, second would have been really young for this. Jared was in the fourth grade.
Coming up to Albany when he was 4.
Oh, okay, well, Jared was instrumental in passing a law that our then Assemblyman David Buchwald, who was in Assemblyman Burdick's seat, passed because of Jared's work as a fourth grader, which mandated school buses to have EpiPens. And this was really important work. And I remember I was on the school board then, and we had a press conference on the grounds of Grafflin Elementary School, and there was Jared, fourth grader, presenting his work to the public. And so it's really my great pleasure to recognize his work again. He has provided us with an Food Allergy Awareness Week proclamation. Jared would have been here today, but in his many activities, he's preparing for a basketball, is it? Basketball tournament. So I'll just say on his behalf that Jared lets us know that on behalf of 1 in 10 residents with food allergies in our state, he has requested a proclamation to be issued for Food Allergy Awareness Week for May 12th to 18th. Food allergies are a life-changing, serious, and increasingly prevalent disease that affects more than 33 million Americans. 1 in every 13 children has food allergies, or approximately 2 children in every classroom. In the US, emergency medical treatment for severe allergic reactions to food has increased 377% in only a decade. Each year, an estimated 3.3 million Americans require emergency room treatment for symptoms of a severe food allergy reaction. And food allergies are costly. A study pegged their annual expense to the American economy as more than $25 billion. There's no cure for food allergy. Allergic reactions to food can range from mild symptoms to anaphylaxis, a serious allergic reaction that can occur rapidly and is potentially life-threatening. With support in declaring Food Allergy Awareness Week, we can continue to increase public awareness about food allergies. It's our objective to help educate schools, restaurants, and the citizens of the town of Newcastle on the serious and potentially life-threatening nature of food allergies. So we have a proclamation here from the town, and I wanted to actually give it to you to present Jared with it, with an official copy to recognize his work. So Stacy Seance's mom is here to accept it for him on his behalf. So I just want to present you with a proclamation, Stacy, and maybe we can get a picture for Jared as well. So come on up.
He was actually in Albany all day today testifying. He was
It's
with
amazing.
Assemblymember Burdick and Senator Harkin, who are both sponsoring.
That's awesome, good for him. Proud mom moments.
He was upset, but if he didn't go today to practice, then he can't play.
Then he can't play
the
in
microphone
the tournament,
back?
yes.
We have a microphone right above.
And
He's gonna be an NBA.
I just want to say that it's Jared Seance
Oh, yeah.
and Stacy Seance. I apologize for the
It's a
mispronunciation.
it's a tricky last name.
So here we are
I went
with
from
the
Feldman.
I'm relying on you.
with the
I'm
proclamation.
Please, go ahead.
So we can hold on to that and take a picture.
Beautiful.
Hopefully my.
Thank you.
Thank you. This
And
means so
that's
much.
for
I mean,
you.
Congratulations,
he was
Stacy.
disappointed to miss tonight, so thank you
Well,
so
we
much. Now
appreciate
you can watch
we
it.
appreciate his work.
Thank you. Well,
Okay,
thank you
thanks for
guys.
being here.
Okay, yeah, please, and what was it? Oh, it's
A lot of proclamations. Yeah, I think I've been asking a few too busy.
Okay, congratulations.
And then We have a lot of proclamations today. So last week, we talked about the town board recognizing federally recognized cultural heritage months. And this month, I'm happy to recognize two of those months. One is Jewish American Heritage Month, and the other is Asian American Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And we are very pleased and proud to offer proclamations for these 2 months, and going forward, we will issue proclamations for all, throughout the year. So at this point, I would like to read our Jewish American Heritage Month proclamation, but since I've read a lot of proclamations and certificates, I will ask another town board member if they would be willing to read. There you go, Jeremy.
All right, Jewish American Heritage Month proclamation. Whereas throughout the history of the United States, generations of Jewish immigrants fleeing persecution have sought the promise of freedom and opportunity to start life anew in America. Whereas we wish to celebrate the enduring heritage of Jewish Americans whose values, culture, and contributions have shaped our character as a nation, and whose resilience, faith, and hope in the face of adversity, prejudice, and persecution has driven us forward in our ongoing march for justice, equality, and freedom. Whereas the United States was the first country in the world to recognize the State of Israel in 1948, and over the years has developed a deep friendship and unbreakable alliance with the State of Israel based upon shared values, and mutual interest. Whereas Jewish Americans have made significant contributions to the arts, entertainment, science and technology, government, business, culinary traditions, and other fields in the United States, Jewish Americans have played an important role in shaping American culture. Whereas for 43 years, every president of the United States has declared a period of time for celebrating the contributions to the United States of the Jewish community's history, heritage, and culture. And since 2006, the month of May has been presidentially declared to be Jewish American Heritage Month, pursuant to bipartisan resolutions of Congress. Now therefore be it resolved that the Town Board of the Town of Newcastle hereby declares and proclaims May to be Jewish American Heritage Month for the Town of Newcastle in the state of New York.
Okay, thank you. Very good. And now we will turn to our recognition of Asian American Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander Heritage Month in the Town of Newcastle. Anyone would like to read this, Jen?
Asian American Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander Heritage Month proclamation. Whereas during Asian American Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander Heritage Month, we celebrate the many achievements and contributions made by Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders to our economic, cultural, spiritual, and political development. And whereas Asian American Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander Heritage Month grew out of the establishment in 1978 of Asian Pacific American Heritage Week, created by Representatives Frank Horton of New York and Norman Y. Mineta of California, and Senators Daniel K. Inouye and Spark Matsunaga from Hawaii, signed into legislation by President Jimmy Carter. And whereas the Town of Newcastle selects the theme for the observance of Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander Heritage Month in May as solidarity, community, engagement, and celebration. And whereas the Town of Newcastle continues to work toward becoming an inclusive community in which all citizens, past, present, and future, are respected and recognized for their contributions and potential contributions to our community, the state, the country, and the world. And whereas the Town of Newcastle is proud to honor the history and contributions of Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders in our community throughout our state and nation. Now therefore be it resolved that the Town Board of the Town of Newcastle hereby declares and proclaims May to be Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander Heritage Month for the Town of Newcastle in the state of New York.
Thank you for reading that, Jen. Thanks very much. Okay. And now we have another certificate of recognition to present. The Chappaqua Volunteer Ambulance Corps has been recognized by the Rotary Club of Chappaqua for their tireless work and commitment as volunteers for our community. We're so fortunate to have CVAC, set of volunteers to save lives and just respond to emergencies. We're very lucky to have them. And unfortunately, I won't be able to attend the Rotary because we have our last in-person engagement session for the Envision Newcastle project. So I just wanted to present the certificate of recognition, read it at our public meeting and give it to Holly, who is part of the Rotary. And Holly, I hope that you can submit it to CVAC tomorrow night, which is the award ceremony.
Gladly.
And I'm sure you'll read it to them, but I'll just read it here. This is a certificate of recognition from the town of Newcastle presented to the Chappaqua Volunteer Ambulance Corps in recognition of your outstanding dedication and steadfast commitment to the health and well-being of our community, and in honor of your Community Service Award for Service Above Self, bestowed by the Rotary Club of Chappaqua. So we're deeply grateful to CVAC and congratulate them on this very special recognition.
I will
There you
pass
go.
it on, thank you.
Okay. All right. Okay, and now we'll turn to the last item on our call to order. We have a modification of the Conservation Board mission statement. The mission statement currently relates to open space, which has been the main mission and an important one for our Conservation Board. But we also know that there have been many environmental efforts throughout town by many people, which includes education and outreach efforts regarding things like healthy yards or pollinator pathways, and many other initiatives that we saw being celebrated and presented during our Earth Day celebration. And those efforts, as of now, don't really currently have a home. So it took the great efforts and organization by individuals in our town to plan our Earth Day, and we recognize that these efforts really needed more of an organizational structure to be effective. So we're going to adjust our mission to the Conservation Board. I know the Conservation Board has been revising its mission and they're working hard on the proper wording and so, but I would like to recognize the efforts that are ongoing outside of the open space mission, because work is going on now, and I think that I'd like to recognize it formally while the Conservation Board continues to revise its mission, and they're free to, continue wordsmithing to fine tune what we're putting out there, but we just want a general statement on the expanded mission. So let me find the wording for that. Hang on a second.
It's actually the last page
It's the last
of
page.
the work session template.
Yes.
Page 71.
It's pretty simple. So the current mission statement, thank you, states that the Conservation Board studies and advises the town board and other town departments, boards and commissions on developing sound open space planning and assuring preservation of natural and scenic resources within the town of Newcastle. So we'll be adding a very simple sentence saying, in addition, the Conservation Board initiates and implements educational programs and outreach efforts on environmental health and best practices. And that's it. Does anyone have any comments or questions on that? Nope. Okay. Okay, so now, since we didn't have time to get to the quarterly financial update during the work session, I'll ask Rob Deary to present that update at this time.
Hi, good evening. So tonight I'm gonna present the first quarter financial summary. I think I've mentioned before, there's not typically a lot of activity in the first quarter of the year. Some of our larger revenue sources have yet to be received. Mortgage tax, the first payment doesn't come in until June. Typically the water revenue we don't start seeing that till middle or end of summer. And on the expense side, a lot of times we haven't even paid a lot of the bills. Sometimes, February, March bills haven't come in and even been paid until April. So this will be somewhat of a brief presentation, but in the last couple of years, we got off a normal cycle and we did financial presentations, but they weren't quarterly, so we've decided to get back on a normal cycle and this will be the first one for 2024. So for the quarterly financial summaries, what I tend to do is I take the I'm doing a comparison versus the budget because actuals versus budget is what's gonna tell us how we're actually doing throughout the year and whether we look like we're trending for a surplus or a deficit at the end of the year. So I review the 4 largest funds in the budget, and basically my benchmark is about 25%. Since the first quarter is 25% of the year, I will look at 25% for revenues and expenses to see where we are and if we're about at that point and how we're trending. So first look at the general fund revenue and expense. You can see both of those are trending just slightly above 25% for the year. 26.82% of our total revenue for the year. And this is non-tax revenue. We don't start, the tax revenue doesn't get booked until April. So about 26.82% of our non-tax revenue has been received and about 26.31% of our expenses have been paid. So those are trending. Revenue's a little higher than expenses, so that's usually a good sign. Although I wouldn't read a ton into it right at this point in time. Highway fund, very little revenue has been received so far. Most of that is interfund revenue, which are transfers from other funds into the highway fund for things like road maintenance and snow plowing at some of the town facilities. The revenue from the highway fund, other than tax revenue, comes from the CHIPS funds that we spoke about tonight. That's typically, those are reimbursable funds and we don't see those until the end of the year typically, after we do the road paving. And we do get reimbursement from the county and from the state for plowing state and county roads. So we haven't seen any of that so far this year. So we're only about 12% of the total revenue received. On the other side, the highway fund expenses, we're at about 21% of expenses. So that's below that 25% and we're trending pretty good there. I'm just presenting first the summary page and then we'll go over some of the specifics for each fund. Like the highway fund and refuse fund, very few revenue sources there outside of taxes. We do get a little bit of money from compost and mulch sales and the disposal of yard waste and some other recycling center operations. First quarter of the year, not a whole lot of activity going on in the town, so we don't see a ton of that. On the other side, the expenses, 22% as well. So that's trending right about the 25, a little bit below the 25%. The water fund is where you really see a big difference because any water bill for for January, February, and March goes back into the end of last year and early part of this year, which are all winter months, and there's not a whole lot of revenue generated. On the other side, a lot of the expense in the water fund is derived from the production or the distribution of water, the chemicals, the electricity, etc. So if we're not selling any water, we're not spending any money to do so either. Okay, just looking at the general fund revenue and a couple of the major sources. We did get the first installment of the county sales tax, and that came in at 1.2 million, which was actually kind of a nice surprise. That's 29% of our total revenue in that budget line.
What did you peg for that?
4.7, I believe. And so this is it's a little more than a quarter of it. And that's actually pretty good news because the first quarter is usually a little bit lower. It's usually the fourth quarter or holiday time when people are spending a little bit more money, or the summer when people are out doing things. So for that to that number to be there in the first quarter, that's good news. Recreation programs, so we've received so far 62% of our revenue for the entire year for recreation. The lion's share of that comes from summer camps, and so far through, in this reminder, this is only through the end of March 31st, the summer camps, we've seen 480,000 out of about 500,000. And there's some other, in that camps line, it's not just summer camps, there's some other camps that we run, so I definitely expect that number to go over the budget, over the 500,000. Building permits are trending very well for this time of year, 411,000, or about 42% of the total budget. We do expect another strong year with building permits. We still have a lot of quite a few units at Chappaqua Crossing that we haven't yet issued the building permits for, so this will probably be, we'll have to take a look with Tom and Bob and the development department and kind of get a better handle on it next year once the Chappaqua Crossing stuff finishes, because we've had several years of revenue coming from that.
To be clear, Rob, sorry, when you say over budget, that's your anticipated revenues, it's going to exceed that, not
Yeah.
over budget as in costs.
Correct, right, on this side, yep, this is the revenue side, so yeah, more revenue than we were expecting, which is great.
Rob, back to the recreation line.
Mhm.
So I assume that this is kind of the peak when you're taking in all of the summer camp revenue and it kind of
Yep.
tapers down. But this is still ahead of what you expected at this stage.
It is right now, because we're still gonna see, we'll get in the fourth quarter, basketball is another revenue driver in the recreation department. We haven't sold the fall or the winter programs yet, so there's still a good amount of revenue to come in. And I think there's probably a little more, I think April is when we see the revenue for some of the other spring programs. So yeah, I think we're definitely trending very well with the recreation programs. And the last one that I wanna highlight that is doing well are the interest earnings. We're already over budget in the general fund this year. That was a tricky line to predict. We used some fund balance last year for our capital project, so the amount of cash in the bank was drawn down a bit, and frankly, we expected to see the Fed reduce the interest rate a couple times by now, and we haven't seen that yet. So at the end of last year, they were on target to reduce it 3 times. In 2024, I think they're probably looking at 2 still, but I'm not certain. I don't think the economy reacted exactly the way they were expecting. So, I mean, on the positive side of that is we still have a decent fund balance and our money's making money. So the interest earnings are gonna wind up quite a bit higher than we anticipated. And just to talk about a couple of the revenue categories not received, police protection, that we haven't received any of that yet. Those are the reimbursements for the SROs that come from the school district that we typically see at the end of the school year, once our SROs have completed their time for the school year. And also the utility company overtime reimbursements that we'll typically see from Verizon or Altice or anybody that's doing work in the town. We have officers on site, we're reimbursed for that. So we haven't seen, I don't think there have been many, if any, details so far in the first quarter of the year. That's typically a summer thing. And mortgage tax, while we haven't seen it yet, I did get a look at the figures and tentatively looking at about 393,000, and that's not tragic, but it's a little bit concerning. It's only 41% of the number, and we get 2 installments a year. I would have liked to see that at least 50% of the number, which is 950,000. So we may fall short of that one this year. You know, in talking to the assessor's office, there doesn't seem to be a lot of inventory out there to sell. So I think sales throughout town, throughout probably Westchester County and probably most of the country are down now, and the interest rate certainly doesn't help that.
How much is that driven by what's going on at Chappaqua Crossing? Or is that already locked in?
I'm not certain about that. This will apply only if there's a mortgage, so if anybody bought those in cash, which they've been known to do, we don't see anything out of that. So I'm not certain how Chappaqua Crossing's affecting that number right now. Okay, on the other side of the ledger, the expenses, just to point out a couple of things that are exceeding the 25% benchmark. One of them is a transfer to capital, and that's up about $209,000 over what that budget is. And that's because we allocated at the beginning of the year, the town board allocated funds from the general fund balance to cover the Gedney Park retaining wall project that was completed this year. So it's gonna show a high variance to the budget, but that was something that the town board approved and that was allocated. Bond principal and interest, you'll see this in each of the four funds that are exceeding budget. Those are budgeted at 100% of the exact cost each year, so they will come in at 100% at the end of the year. The variance early on looks bigger because of the timing of the bond payments. We have a big payment in January and another big payment in February, so that kind of skews that as far as giving a quarterly analysis. The salaries, the general fund salaries are at 26%, which is a pretty good number when compared with the 25%. And the reason that it's actually over 25% is because in the first quarter of the year, we actually had 7 payrolls instead of 6. So because of the way we do payroll, we have 26 pay periods in a year. There are 2 quarters that have 7 payrolls and 2 that have 6 in it. So. Police expenses, the total expenses are about 27% of their total budget for the year. That's skewed a little bit by the vehicles that we purchased this year. Purchasing them earlier in the year means that we're at a higher percentage of their budget. Nothing concerning there, these are all expenses that were expected. And holiday pay, the timing of that, it's contractual obligation. Police officers are able to either take their holiday time in pay or in time off. It's at their discretion which they choose, and there are certain times during the year when that's paid out. So that number's not concerning. The budget's about $300,000 and we're typically under that each year. Expenses that are trending below 25%, employee benefits, that's a great number for that right now at 23%. That means the expenses are right about where we expected them to be for the year. General fund overtime is only about 20% of the total budget, and that's good. That means we haven't seen any excess overtime. And Lena, we took first quarter of the year. We had a little. We were going back and forth with the formatting of the legal bill, so I think we're on track. But
I love making the budget.
If you look at the number of the first quarter, it was 0. So.
You know, you've really endeared yourself to the board, let me put it to you that way.
Not your partners, but the board loves you.
Well,
Not so much.
just don't try to make up for it.
Over to the highway fund revenue, I mentioned in the summary, not a ton of revenue sources received yet. We did the book entry for the interfund revenues, and as I mentioned, the large categories, CHIPS, we had budgeted. I will mention this, we budget each year the known amount for CHIPS, which was $425,000 at the time of budget. We approved tonight accepting $586,000 in CHIPS. Some of those other funds are discretionary and not necessarily allocated each year by the state. So we budget what we know we're going to get, and when we do see a surplus like that, we put that straight back into road paving. So what then happens is we have another $160,000. We'll increase our road paving budget for the year by $160,000. We've done that for the last 10 or 12 years. The formula works out pretty good to me.
Good to know.
And we do expect close to $100,000 from combined from the state and county for the snow removal on their roads, and we'll receive that later in the year. On the highway fund expense side, like I spoke of in the general fund, the bond principal and interest a little bit higher than the 25%. Highway department salaries, 26%, that's a good number, again, same situation as the general fund. Snow removal costs, so those came in, were about 44% of the total budget, but when you look at it, that's a pretty good number right now. Typically, we don't see much snow in November, and maybe a little bit in December. So the fact that we're over 3 months, less than half of that annual budget, that's a pretty good trend. And that includes overtime, salt, liquid de-icing, and maintenance of the vehicles.
What do you usually see in that line, like the year over year?
It's
I'm sure it changes,
It's so variable. We budget about 200,000 for overtime. I think we're closer to 300,000 for salt. And they are, when you look at it over a 10-year period, those numbers we use are pretty good. That's a good baseline. Some years we win and some years we lose, just depending on what the weather's like. So, that's a good reason to keep somewhat of a fund balance in the highway fund, because you don't know what you're gonna get each year. And you obviously have to react to what you have. You can't say, well, we're not gonna plow snow for this storm that we got in, the middle of April because we didn't budget for it. We're gonna do it, and then we dip into our fund balance. That was also because we had a nice fund balance, that was how we've been able to cope with some of these hurricanes that we've had going back to Sandy and Irene and Ida and Isaias. We have funds to pay for the removal of that stuff. We get reimbursed by FEMA, but it's sometimes 2 to 3 years later. In fact, last year, we accepted reimbursement for, I think, Isaias last year. So Sandy and Irene, those took up to 3 years. We do get the money, but it takes a bit of time. And numbers that are below budget, employee benefits, it's a good trend across the board that those are less than 25% of our overall budget. And the highway department overtime is at 23%. That's good news as well.
Rob, what do you attribute the trend on the employee benefits being a little bit lower than what you'd expected it to?
Well, we haven't paid workers' comp yet, which is across all the funds, it's about 300,000. So if we had paid that, we would probably be trending right about 25%. But we've been spot on with the other stuff, the health insurance and anything else that goes into that, the dental insurance, FICA, Medicare, because we've controlled the payroll expenses, those numbers are also controlled, so we're looking good there. The refuse fund, I mentioned before, not much in the way of revenue that's come in so far, a little bit of interfund revenue, some interest earnings, and I think small amount for the sale of scrap metals. Typically the lion's share of the refuse fund revenue comes in Q2 and Q3 once everybody gets out there and starts doing the yard work and buying the compost and mulch from the recycling center. Refuse fund expenses, salaries, bond principal and interest, same as the other couple funds. Snow removal, why did I include that twice? That was called cut and pasting and missing that number. And employee benefits for the refuse fund. Because I apportion them based on salary, it's not an exact number, but that's why that shows 18% as opposed to a couple of the other funds that are in the 20s. One thing that is down is the transfer site fees, which is good news. That's what we pay to dispose of the refuse. So that would tell me that we're actually putting less product in the incinerator, landfill, or wherever else it's going than we would have expected.
That's a good thing.
Okay, last fund is the water fund. Revenue at this time of year, not much since we haven't sold a lot of water. Penalties and interest is a little bit higher than we would expect, 23,497. I think that probably comes from the re-levy process that we do in the first quarter each year, that gets added to the tax bills. So we collect penalties and interest that are included in those bills. So I think that's why that's skewed a little bit higher. And interest earnings, the water fund has the second highest amount of cash in the bank, so that's why you're seeing that number kind of trend higher, just like it did in the general fund. And revenue water consumption, we're only at about 15% of annual revenue so far in the first quarter. Then on the expense side, just like the other funds, the bond principal and interest, the ozone generator maintenance right now, and we just approved another one tonight. The total budget, we're on track for that, but we've done some of the repair work early in the year, so that's why that shows in comparison to the total budget now a little bit higher for the first quarter. And the standby generator, that we budgeted a smaller amount this year because we only expected to use that for I think like 6 or 7 months, hopefully. I'm not sure when that will exactly
And shortly though.
come online. But so that was kind of front loaded in the first few months of the year. And again, you see the employee benefits about 21% of their overall budget. I don't expect anybody to really be able to read it on the screen. It was included in your packet for tonight. And I just use this as a demonstration just against, I mentioned this last time I gave a financial presentation just to show that we're pretty healthy cash flow wise and that we have a good handle on it. You see what we're projecting for April once the tax collections came in. April and September are usually the two of the higher months of the year. That will start to trend down. In May, we have to pay Westchester County what we collected from their tax levy. We have one payment in May and another one in October. September is when we collect school taxes, so the amount of cash on hand is pretty high, at least for a month until we start paying out the school districts. And that's what I've got. So any other questions?
Seems pretty healthy.
Well, thank you, Rob. It's good to know where we are throughout the year, so I really appreciate you're giving us these quarterly reports again.
Yeah, I think it's
Really
important, and I'll say the last time when the state came down, it was 3 or 4 years ago when they did an audit here. And that's one of the things that they like to see is that I'm speaking to the board, informing the board of the financial position and you know, so that everyone's informed.
Wow, even more important if it's part of the state audit assessment.
Yeah, definitely.
Very good, thank you, thanks so much. Okay, we skipped a few things at the beginning because we had people waiting in the audience and Rob hadn't given his report that was supposed to be in the work session, so I apologize, Jill. We skipped over the first items that included you. I will hold my supervisor's report to my newsletter tomorrow, but do you have announcements or?
I'm not going to give them, but
Okay.
if you could just mention the Envision and also the Memorial Day.
Oh, yes. So we,
No.
as hopefully you all know, we are engaged and in the midst of our Envision Newcastle project. We are soliciting input from our residents, if you haven't heard yet, on the uses of our 23 acres of town-owned land surrounding the train station, which includes the area of Town Hall, the park, and the basketball court as well. We've had robust engagement. We had a walking tour that was that about 50 or 60 people participated in. We had about 40 participants in our first engagement session at the Bell School last Monday, and we have our second session tomorrow. So if you haven't registered, please do so, and if you can make it at the last minute, you don't necessarily need to register. We hope you can all join us tomorrow at the Bell School between 7 and 9 p.m. Okay, it's at the last one, people had really a lot of fun. We were set up at round tables. There were about 7 to 8 people per table, and you got to play around with maps and little Lego blocks and dots and express your various interests in different ways, whether it was to see a new community center or to do what one of our consultants called placemaking. It's not necessarily about developments, it is about housing too, but it's also about where you might wanna see more greenery, more pathways connecting the different areas where children might like to play. So it's a good opportunity to give us your input. And what was the second, Memorial Day Parade? All right, well, I need to have my calendar in front of me. Memorial Day Parade is this year is
Monday, May 27th.
Monday, May 27th. So we will be gathering at the memorial at 10:30 and at let's see, what is the name of that street?
Ridgewood Terrace.
Yeah,
Is it
the parade
is-
kicks off at 11
Ridgewood.
o'clock at Ridgewood Terrace.
Okay, but that street is Elm
Ridgewood.
Ridgewood Street. Okay, at 11 AM. So we hope that everyone comes. We usually have a nice showing and people are lined up along the roads to see the parade, and it's we have elected officials who are usually always consistently here with us, so we expect to have another wonderful parade and we are all looking forward to it. Jill, anything else that you might have added to your report? Okay, we hope your throat feels better really soon. And thank you for being with us. You can whisper if there's anything I can hear you. I think that's it.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. So at this time, we've reached the public comment section. So seeing that there's no one in the audience, I will ask if there's anyone online for public comment.
We have no hands raised.
No hands raised, okay, so there's no public comment today. So we will get to our consent agenda. Hang on a second.
Did you want me to start?
Yeah, I'm just. Sorry, I had a lot of papers and proclamations this week. Alright, so we'll start with Holly, go ahead.
I move to adopt the items 1 through 11 as listed on the consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye. I move to retroactively approve the payment of claims in the amount of $798,288.38 listed on the summary AP check register and detail voucher detail reports dated May 9th, 2024. Checks were printed and distributed to each claimant listed on Thursday, May 9th, 2024.
Second.
All in favor?
I move to approve the payment of claims in the amount of $97,408.53 listed on the summary pre-check writing report and detail voucher. Detail report dated May 10th, 2024. Checks will be printed and distributed to each claimant listed on Wednesday, May 15th, 2024.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I move to authorize the hiring of Kate Ginsburg and Raisha Patel with a start date of May 20th, 2024, as well as Ava Carini with a start date of June 17th, 2024, as recreation attendants within the Recreation and Parks Department to serve as art center assistants at the hourly rate of $16 per hour.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I move to authorize the hiring of Jack Chase for the position of laborer within the Department of Public Works Highway Unit at the annual salary of $51,247.97, effective May 28th, 2024.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Just a note, I had mine says $46. Do you have different?
246, is that
Yeah,
what I
you
said?
said 7, it's okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Holly.
I move to authorize the reappointment of Claudia Mulas and Travis Bechtel as members of the Architectural Review Board for another 3-year term effective June 1st, 2024 to May 31st, 2027.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I move to authorize increasing membership of the Holocaust and Human Rights Committee to allow for 12 adult members and 2 student members.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're gonna
Jen,
table
you wanna take number 8? Number 8.
Oh, we're skipping
Yeah,
seven?
yeah.
I move to approve modification of the mission statement to include education and outreach and establish a co-chair position to aid in the expanded mission for the Conservation Board as follows. The Conservation Board studies and advises the town board and other town departments, boards, and commissions on developing sound open space planning and assuring preservation of natural and scenic resources within the town of Newcastle.
In addition, the Conservation Board initiates and implements educational programs on environmental health and best practices.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, I think, hang on. Okay, that wasn't exactly as I had read the what I put down with the additional sentence for the Conservation Board.
Something about outreach.
Yeah, I'm not sure how exactly it's different, let me take a look.
Why don't you
I'm
read
sorry,
yours
what-
and you can adopt yours?
what-
Yeah, can we
Yeah, why don't we go to page 71 and just put in that sentence?
Okay, let me reread that.
sorry about
The Conservation Board studies and advises the town board and other town departments, boards, and commissions on developing sound open space planning and assuring preservation of natural and scenic resources within the town of Newcastle. In addition, the Conservation Board initiates and implements educational programs and outreach efforts on environmental health and best practices.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, it wasn't that different, but I couldn't tell. Okay, thank you.
Move to adjourn?
All right, motion to adjourn.
Yeah, move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we're now adjourned. Thank you, everyone.